Shock hook, opening scene. The words hit the room like a slap. Low IQ. 2 syllables sharpened into a verdict, tossed casually, confidently, as if history itself were nodding along. Laughter flickered at the edges, uncertain and nervous, while the air thickened with something heavier than insult. Cameras tightened their focus. Screens across the country refreshed at once. A moment had just escaped the room. Jasmine did not move. She did not blink. The silence around her grew louder than the comment itself, stretching long enough for discomfort to settle in. For a beat, the insult hovered unanswered, daring her to flinch, daring her to confirm the caricature it tried to draw. Across the nation, clips began circulating before the echo faded. Captions raced ahead of facts. Outrage ignited. Some nodded knowingly. Others recoiled. The familiar script threatened to replay itself again, a powerful man reducing a woman to a label, betting the room would move on. But something felt different this time. The insult did not land cleanly. It lingered, exposed, stripped of its bravado by the stillness that followed. Trump shifted, waiting for noise, waiting for reaction, waiting for the chaos that usually rescued moments like this from consequence. Instead, there was restraint, a calm that refused to rush, a quiet that invited the country to look closer. Jasmine's composure unsettled the rhythm of dominance the insult depended on. In that pause, the audience began to sense it too. This was not going to end the way it usually did. Social feeds flooded with a single question. Was she stunned, or was she calculating? Was this silence surrender, or something far more dangerous? The room held its breath, unaware that the power had already begun to change hands. And then, just as the certainty cracked, Jasmine prepared to speak, and everything people thought they knew about moments like this was about to be rewritten forever. Raising the stakes. This was never just about an insult. It was about who is allowed to define intelligence in America and who is expected to accept the definition without protest. When the word low IQ was spoken, it carried decades of coded dismissal, a shorthand used to question legitimacy, belonging, and worth. It wasn't aimed only at Jasmine. It was aimed at everyone who has ever been told they did not quite measure up to someone else's standard. Politically, the moment mattered because it revealed the strategy beneath the spectacle. Reduce your opponent, shrink them to a label, turn complexity into mockery, and dare them to react emotionally. It is a tactic designed not to win arguments but to dominate attention. And for years it has worked precisely because silence is misread as weakness and anger is framed as proof. Culturally, the insult landed in a country already raw with division. Immigrants, women, people of color, and first-generation strivers recognized the move instantly. They have heard it in classrooms, boardrooms, and headlines. The message is always the same. You are here on probation, and your competence is up for debate. That is why the pause that followed felt dangerous. It threatened to interrupt a familiar power dynamic. Symbolically, the exchange unfolded on a national stage where words become signals. This was not just one man speaking. It was a worldview asserting itself, betting that confidence could substitute for credibility. If unchallenged, it would reinforce the idea that volume outweighs substance and that dignity is optional in public life. Viewers sensed the stakes rising in real time. Commentators leaned forward. Phones buzzed. People asked not whether Jasmine was offended, but whether she would play the role written for her. The country has seen this script before, and it rarely ends in justice. What made this moment different was not the insult, but the audience. Millions were watching with a hunger for something else, something that proved preparation could outlast provocation. They understood that how Jasmine responded would echo far beyond this room, shaping how future confrontations would be handled. Because if she dismantled the insult without becoming it, the consequences would ripple outward. If she failed, the old rules would stand unchallenged. Either way, this exchange was no longer fleeting. It was becoming a line in the sand, and the next word spoken would decide which side history remembered. And somewhere between the broadcast delay and the viral replay, people realized they were witnessing a test, not just of Jasmine, but of the moment itself. Could composure confront contempt without bending to it? Could intelligence be redefined in plain sight? The answer had not arrived yet, but anticipation tightened across the country, because when she finally chose to answer, it would not simply respond to an insult. It would challenge a habit, confront a hierarchy, and force a reckoning that would not fade when the cameras cut away. The silence was almost over, and everyone knew the next seconds would decide everything. All that remained was her voice, poised to break the stillness and change the narrative forever. The antagonist exposed. Trump's rhetoric has always followed a familiar pattern, one perfected long before this room, this moment, or this target. He does not argue to persuade. He asserts to dominate. His language is built not for debate, but for spectacle, where volume replaces evidence and repetition stands in for proof. The goal is simple: reduce the opponent before the audience has time to consider what they might actually be saying. Belittlement is his opening move. Names are assigned like shortcuts, designed to collapse a person into a caricature small enough to dismiss. Crooked, sleepy, weak, low IQ. Each label strips away complexity and invites the listener to stop thinking further. Once the insult sticks, substance becomes optional. The conversation shifts from ideas to personalities, and power flows toward whoever appears most unbothered by the mess left behind. This approach thrives on contradiction, though it pretends not to. Trump praises intelligence while mocking expertise. He claims strength while avoiding scrutiny. He frames himself as a truth-teller, even as his statements bend with convenience. The bravado is loud, but it is rarely consistent, and that inconsistency is hidden by confidence. He moves quickly, counting on momentum to outrun memory. The phrase low IQ is not accidental. It is a weaponized shortcut loaded with cultural history and deniability. On the surface, it sounds juvenile, almost unserious, but beneath it lies an accusation that cuts deeper than policy disagreement. It questions competence, legitimacy, and worth in one stroke. It invites supporters to feel superior without having to prove anything at all. Politically, this tactic works because it shifts the burden. The insulted must now decide how to respond, knowing any visible anger will be framed as confirmation. Silence is read as weakness. Defense is portrayed as insecurity. The trap is designed so that the aggressor never has to justify the claim. He only has to repeat it loudly enough. For years, this method has flourished in environments addicted to conflict. News cycles reward outrage. Social platforms amplify provocation. Each insult becomes content stripped of context and endlessly replayed. Trump understands this ecosystem instinctively. He feeds it sound bites that travel faster than facts and then stands back as the noise does the work for him. Yet beneath the dominance is a dependency. This style cannot survive sustained scrutiny. It requires opponents who rush, who react, who take the bait. It relies on the assumption that no one will slow the moment down long enough to examine the emptiness at its center. When someone refuses to play their assigned role, the spell weakens. That is why this moment mattered. Trump delivered the insult with practiced ease, expecting the usual outcomes. What he did not account for was resistance through restraint. He underestimated the danger of composure in a system built on chaos. He mistook quiet for submission and calm for absence. He has relied on this asymmetry for decades, shaping a persona that thrives when others are forced onto the defensive. By attacking intelligence, he avoids discussing ideas. By mocking preparation, he reframes ignorance as authenticity. It is a performance calibrated to reward certainty over curiosity. But this weapon has limits. It assumes the target will internalize the insult or explode against it. It assumes the room will move on before meaning can catch up. And it assumes the speaker will never be required to explain himself. When those assumptions fail, the tactic is suddenly naked, revealed as hollow theater. Here, the contrast was impossible to ignore. Bravado faced patience. Volume met stillness. The insult echoed, but nothing followed it. No argument, no evidence, no substance to support the claim. In that gap, the audience began to see the pattern for what it was, a reliance on dominance precisely because dominance was all that remained. Trump waited for the familiar surge of reaction, unaware that the energy had shifted. The insult no longer felt powerful, it felt exposed. And in that exposure, something dangerous emerged for him, the possibility that control could be taken without confrontation, that authority could be claimed without raising a voice. What Trump did not realize was who he had just underestimated: the protagonist's foundation. Jasmine did not arrive at this moment by accident, and she did not inhabit it as a reaction. Long before the cameras tightened their frames and the insult cut through the room, she had built herself deliberately, layer by layer, through discipline rather than performance. Her presence carried the weight of preparation, the kind forged quietly, away from applause, where competence is sharpened without witnesses. Her story was not one of spectacle, but of accumulation. Education earned rather than assumed. Experience gathered in rooms that did not pause for her comfort. She had learned early that intelligence is rarely announced. It reveals itself through consistency, through listening before speaking, through knowing when not to rush. While others mastered the art of the headline, she mastered the details beneath it. Jasmine's record spoke in full sentences, not slogans. Policy work completed without fanfare. Committees navigated with patience, conversations held with people who disagreed with her, not to win points, but to understand leverage. She had studied how power behaves when challenged and how it unravels when exposed gently. That understanding did not come from instinct alone. It came from attention. In spaces where volume is often mistaken for authority, Jasmine learned the value of restraint. She listened longer than expected. She asked questions others skipped. She let opponents reveal themselves fully, believing that interruption often saves them from their own excess. Her silence was never empty. It was occupied with calculation. This is what made the contrast so stark. As Trump postured, filling the air with certainty, Jasmine gathered information. As he reduced complexity to insult, she held on to nuance. Where he relied on dominance to move the moment forward, she relied on substance to slow it down. Noise rushed ahead, substance waited. She understood the pressure to perform outrage. The audience often demands it, craving visible emotion as proof of authenticity. But Jasmine had seen how that demand functions as a trap, rewarding reaction while punishing thought. She refused to give the insult that satisfaction. Her composure was not passive, it was strategic. Her background had taught her what happens when people underestimate you. It happens quietly at first, in lowered expectations and casual dismissal. Then it hardens into opportunity. Underestimation creates space. Jasmine learned to operate inside that space, using it to prepare rather than protest. She had also learned that intelligence in public life is often treated as something to be proven repeatedly by those denied the presumption of it. Rather than accept that burden, she redefined it. Intelligence became preparation, it became clarity, it became the ability to withstand provocation without surrendering focus. As the room waited for her to react, Jasmine was doing what she always did. She was listening. She was noting tone, posture, timing. She was letting the insult sit long enough for its emptiness to reveal itself. She was allowing the audience to feel the discomfort rather than rescuing them from it. This refusal unsettled expectations. People are accustomed to immediate answers, to quick rebuttals, to emotional cues that tell them how to feel. Jasmine offered none of that. Instead, she offered presence, the kind that suggests control without demanding it. Her preparation was not visible in that moment, but it was there, informing every breath, every pause. She knew the facts. She knew the record. She knew the patterns of attack and the rhythms of debate. More importantly, she knew herself. She trusted that she did not need to rush to be heard. In a culture that rewards speed, she chose timing. In a room addicted to dominance, she practiced patience. This was not hesitation. It was discipline. The kind that turns a moment into leverage. As Trump waited for the familiar explosion, Jasmine waited for alignment. The alignment between the room, the audience, and the truth she was prepared to deliver. She understood that when substance finally enters a space overwhelmed by noise, it does not need to shout. It only needs to arrive intact. The power dynamic had already begun to shift, though few recognized it yet. The insult no longer belonged to the speaker. It hovered, unsupported, while Jasmine stood grounded beneath it. And in that stillness, anticipation grew, not for reaction, but for resolution. When she finally spoke, the entire dynamic shifted. Debate, escalation. The air crackled with tension as the exchange deepened. Trump leaned in, smirk widening, voice rising just enough to remind the room of the rhythm he controlled. Each word landed like a hammer designed to provoke, to unbalance, to force an emotional misstep. Interruptions punctuated the moment, sharp, deliberate, meant to assert dominance, to break the listener's composure. Jasmine did not flinch. She absorbed each jab, each sneer, each carefully calculated pause. Her calm was not absence, it was strategy. She allowed the moment to stretch, elongating the silence between provocation and response, letting the audience lean forward, sensing that something significant was coming. Every pause magnified the weight of the room. Every breath she took expanded the anticipation. Trump doubled down. He repeated phrases, emphasized the insult, tried to paint the calm as hesitation. His confidence radiated certainty, as if volume alone could anchor truth. The audience shifted in their seats, some unsettled, some waiting for the usual chaos to erupt. Cameras panned, capturing reactions that oscillated between amusement, confusion, and growing curiosity. Every gesture from Trump became more pronounced, a dance of arrogance meant to fill space and demand attention. But Jasmine's eyes remained fixed, attentive. Her posture did not break. Her breathing did not quicken. In that contrast, the imbalance became visible, not the imbalance of power, but the imbalance of control. Noise could dominate a moment, but substance could redirect it, and Jasmine was doing exactly that without a single word. The room felt it, the viewers at home felt it. Something was shifting beneath the surface. The spectacle of insult was meeting the gravity of preparation. Momentum that had been assumed belonged entirely to the aggressor began to fracture. People could sense a turning point approaching even before it arrived, as if the air itself was holding its breath for what was coming next. The tension was palpable, conversations frozen mid-thought, phones poised for the inevitable reaction, every eye on Jasmine waiting for the crack that never came. The more Trump pressed, the more the silence around her stretched, accumulating weight, suspense, and expectation. Then Jasmine leaned forward, and the room went silent. The mic drop, counterattack. Jasmine's voice broke the silence, calm, deliberate, precise. There was no flare of outrage, no defensiveness, no mimicry of the insult. Instead, she spoke with clarity, each word measured, each pause intentional. She reframed the question of intelligence, not as something to be bestowed or denied by others, but as something demonstrated through preparation, insight, and integrity. The words carried weight because they were rooted in truth, not theatrics. She exposed the emptiness of the insult without naming it. Low IQ, she implied, is a claim that requires proof. Yet the room had already seen the evidence, facts twisted, claims repeated without foundation, substance sacrificed for spectacle. Her response highlighted the pattern without needing to raise her voice, and the contrast was devastatingly clear. As she shifted the conversation toward concrete points, policy decisions, record of action, consistent dedication, Trump's confidence faltered. The attack that was meant to dominate the room instead began to unravel. Each pause she allowed became a mirror, reflecting the hollowness of the insult back onto him. The audience stirred, murmurs rippled through the room, people leaned in, caught between disbelief and admiration. Faces that had expected chaos now registered surprise. Trump's smirk tightened, a flicker of unease crossing his expression. He attempted to reclaim the narrative, interject, assert control, but Jasmine's rhythm was unbroken. Her composure transformed the room, shifting attention from the noise of belittlement to the substance of accomplishment. Every listener understood the insult no longer set the agenda. Jasmine had. She layered her words carefully, each sentence building on the last, guiding the audience toward a realization. Intelligence is not a label thrown casually in the air. It is earned, demonstrated, and defended through action and understanding. Her restraint amplified the impact. Where he had relied on dominance, she relied on precision. Where he expected reaction, she delivered reflection. And the effect was undeniable. Silence followed each of her statements, but it was a charged silence, the kind that amplifies meaning rather than empties it. Eyes widened, whispers exchanged, the cameras lingered longer on expressions than on the words themselves. Even opponents in the room felt the shift, sensing that what they were witnessing was a moment that could not be ignored or easily erased. Trump's attempts to interrupt were met not with anger, but with calculated pauses, letting his defenses falter under scrutiny. He was no longer the aggressor. He had become reactive, defensive, and increasingly exposed. The audience, both present and watching through screens, recognized the imbalance. Control had quietly passed from one side to the other, executed with precision rather than performance. By the time Jasmine concluded, the room was fully absorbed in the power of her delivery. She had dismantled the attack without shouting, without spectacle, and yet the impact was absolute. The words lingered, carrying weight far beyond the walls of that space. Every camera angle captured the subtle expressions, every live feed reflected the shift, every social platform waited for confirmation of what had just occurred. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. Aftermath, shockwaves. The moment did not fade, it exploded. Social media feeds lit up as clips circulated faster than anyone could track. Hashtags appeared almost instantly, trending within minutes, a cascade of validation and commentary that no algorithm could ignore. People replayed the moment, frame by frame, capturing every pause, every deliberate glance, every inflection in Jasmine's voice. Experiences mirrored in Jasmine's restraint and clarity. Meanwhile, critics scrambled, attempting to recast the narrative, questioning interpretations, or redirecting focus elsewhere. Even some neutral observers, those who had entered the moment expecting the usual chaos, found themselves acknowledging the shift in power. News outlets dissected the exchange. Headlines ranged from incredulous to reverent, each attempting to capture what had just occurred. Clips became memes, sound bites were tweeted, and discussion threads stretched for hours. Analysts debated not just the words,